Yo, what's going on, guys? Is this mic even working? Yeah, it's working. That's good. I've just spent an hour just trying to get this mic to work. Fucking hell. Anyway, so for today's video, I just kind of woke up and I felt like painting some clouds. So that's going to be what's on the agenda today. Now, the thing about painting clouds is there's really no set system that's put in place for painting clouds, because obviously clouds come in all different types of sizes, shapes, flavors, all of that stuff. So I'm just going to sort of go through the way that I would paint something, and if you guys want to follow along, that's fine as well. So let's get started then. So the first thing that I like to do when I'm painting clouds is obviously, you know, pretty much what everyone else would do, and that is just a sketch, just so we can make sure we've got the correct shapes and, you know, like everything, all the proportions are all correct and everything as well. So let's just do that now. I'm just going to simplify all these houses and all these trees on the bottom just into sort of like one big large shape, because that's not really the focus of today's video. Alright, so let's get started with sketching the cloud. Now, when I draw clouds, I really like to sort of stylize them into like nice large shapes. That's just the way that I like to do it. But if you want to do something that's a little bit more realistic, then that's fine as well. Just make sure that you're staying zoomed out when you're doing a sketch, just so you can sort of compare back and forth to see if everything is like the right size and the right shape. Now, the reason why I've sort of simplified this, like I haven't gone in and drawn all the little contours and everything like that, is because I just want this mod to be like a general placeholder of the clouds themselves, and then when I go in with the brushes, that's where I'm going to be experimenting with all the different shapes and stuff, so I can get some interesting brushwork that shows through. Alright, now that we've got the sketch in place, I'm just going to drop the opacity a little bit and create a new layer, put it underneath the first one, and now we're going to go in with the sky color. So what you need to understand about skies is, can you see that there's a very strong gradation, well, a sort of a subtle gradation actually, between dark at the top and then lighter towards the bottom. This is something that you can see outside as well. So usually the sky that appears near the horizon is brighter, and then when you go towards the highest point of the sky, which is known as the zenith, that is usually a darker, more saturated color. So that's something that you can add in your paintings to make things look a little bit more realistic. So let's do that now. So I'm just going to go in with a bit of an airbrush, and you can see that there's quite a bit of a difference. So we need to increase the saturation a little bit, and maybe we'll change the hue slightly as well. So yeah, that seems about right. And near the horizon, let's just make things a little bit brighter. Okay, now that we've done that, what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably just going to block in all of this here as one big shape. So let's just find a suitable brush to do that first. Now let's go into the main part, painting the cloud. So I think painting clouds like this, you know, these really sort of big epic ones like that you see in the reference, there's two main things that you should probably keep in mind when it comes to brushes. So I think you should use two brushes. One of them should be a brush where it has little or zero opacity. So I'm just going to paint it in red first, just so it's easier to see. But have you noticed that this brush itself doesn't have much opacity, and that kind of makes it easier to block in that general silhouette. So that's probably the type of brush that you want to use. Obviously you don't have to use the exact same brush as the one that I'm using. It can have a little bit of texture as well, like you can see here, but I think using these brushes that have sort of less opacity or no opacity tends to be better when you're trying to block in the general shape. Then once you're trying to paint everything that's inside the cloud, then you know you can experiment with airbrushes and brushes that have varying levels of opacity basically. Now what we're going to try doing is we're just going to try getting in the major light and shadow shapes. So now what I want to do is I'm just going to create a separate layer, and then I'm just going to attach it as a clipping mask. The way that you can do that is if you just create another layer here and you just hold Ctrl Alt G, that creates a clipping mask. So now anything that you paint within there is clipped to that layer. So let's choose a shadow color. So probably we'll keep the hue around about the same. We're going to increase the saturation a little bit and we'll drop the value around about there. Let's see if that's okay. Then that might be a little bit too dark. There, that seems like a good color. Basically we just want to paint in some of the shapes that we see. Now it's kind of hard sometimes to find out what is in shadow and what is in light. So just do your best, try to come up with some interesting shapes, and you can always go in with different values and like mix the brushes just to blur some of the edges between light and shadow, so we can make things look a little bit realistic. But really the first main thing is we just want to block in some of the easier light and shadow shapes that we can see on screen. So let's do that now. So what I'm actually going to do is, you can probably see on the reference, but some of the shadows on this side of the cloud are kind of brighter than some of the shadows that appear on this side of the cloud. So what I've done is, because I've painted this on its own separate layer, I'm just going to go in with an airbrush and I'm going to lock that layer, and we're just going to increase the value a little bit, and we're just going to go in with that airbrush and lighten things up a little. This just kind of makes it a little bit easier for us. There we go. And if you want, you can even go in with this and darken things a little bit there. Yep, perfect. So now what we're going to do is, because it's looking very graphic at the moment, like there's quite a bit of contrast between the light shapes and the shadow shapes, I'm going to choose a value that's sort of somewhere in between. So this is the light value and this is the shadow value, and we're going to choose this value here. Maybe a bit brighter actually. Yeah, there we go. So that's going to be the value for some of the halftone areas. So those are the areas that are not exactly in the highlights, not exactly in the shadows. We're going to use this value to block in some of those shapes there. So let's do that now. Alright, so I'm going to tone down the opacity a little bit on my line drawing, because I feel like it's getting a little bit distracting for me to see the shapes and what exactly it is that I'm painting. Now if you notice here, there's a little bit of reflected light that's coming from the sky and it's hitting this part of the cloud that's in shadow. So what you can do is, on a separate layer, find that value, so that's this value here, and just ever so slightly bump up the brightness, and that's something that you can use as the reflected light color. It just helps you add a little bit of that realism. Now I feel like the shadows on my cloud, especially around about this side, are maybe a little bit too dark. So I'm going to get a levels adjustment, and we're just going to take the black point and shift it slightly. and then with an airbrush we can just mask in the area that we want that effect to be applied on. So just there. So if you toggle that on and off, it might be subtle, I don't know if you guys can pick it up, but that's kind of the effect that we're getting. Alright, so on this part of the painting you can see there's sort of like these small pockets in the clouds that are very dark. So that's what we're going to paint now. So instead of just sort of going in there and trying to manually, move the brush around and try to get into those pockets, what you can do is just get your magic wand tool. Because there's so many different shapes that you've already added, just hit that and obviously choose a slightly darker color, and now you can just go in and you don't have to worry about ruining any of the shapes that you've created. So that's what you can do here. Alright, so now I'm going to go in and add some of these very bright highlights that you see on the edge of the cloud. Alright, so now that we've kind of got all the basic major shapes in there, I feel like obviously it's looking a little bit too crispy. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go in with a bit of a mixer brush. So just find one of your favorite mixer brushes and obviously just blend in some of the areas that need to be blended in. So let's take a look at it before and after. Yeah, I feel like especially when you use the mixer brush with this, it really starts to bring some of the forms to life, so I kind of like how that's looking. I feel like this is a little bit too stylized, so I'm gonna go back in and probably just adjust the silhouette a little bit more. We're gonna try keeping some of the kind of like rounder forms in there. So I've merged everything down onto its layer, and now I'm just gonna kind of go in with a mask and just erase out some of the parts where I want the silhouette to look a little bit different. Alright, so comparing from before and after, this is before and this is after. Now I think I'm going to go in and probably just kind of smudge things a little bit more, so I'm going to do that now. So on this side, there's some parts of the cloud that are peeking out and catching some of the direct light that's coming from the sun, and I haven't really added that here, so I'm just going to add that in now. I think what I'm probably going to do now is I'm probably just going to sort of like fill in some of the information on these houses and these trees and stuff here. So yeah. You know, since I'm lazy and you know all of this is green, and I want to obviously add some of the blue light from the sky, and I'm just going to create a levels adjustment. Go to the red channel, and then we're just going to adjust this slider. Or actually, we're going to go to the blue channel. Just going to adjust this slider until we see some blue. Going to hit Control I to inverse the selection. Go in with an airbrush, and then any parts that are not green, and I want to add some of that blue in. You can just do it like that. This is just like a cheap and dirty way of sort of like changing colors, I guess. But yeah. Then obviously you can go in, you can add as much blue as you want. Right, so we pretty much got like a decent looking cloud, and I'm just gonna go in with some final color adjustments and stuff. So I think I'm just gonna increase the contrast a little bit, and I think we might just leave the midtones where they are. And another thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go in with the color balance. I'm just gonna add a little bit more blue, and on the mask itself, I'm just going to mask out the trees because we want to keep some of the yellow in there. And then finally we'll just add some exposure as well. Just ever so slightly. So before and after. Nice. Alright guys, that's pretty much this full video. I don't really have any more things I want to add. I'll probably just do a little bit more painting after this voiceover, but I hope you guys picked up some interesting techniques that you can use, you know, when you're painting clouds or like whatever it is. And if you've got any questions about anything, or if you want to see anything else from me, please just drop me a comment, like, subscribe, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thanks.